the recording. And okay.
All
I
right.
think we're ready.
I'll go ahead and call to order this March 13th meeting of the Moab Planning Commission, March 13th, 2025 at 6:26 p.m. So it's worth noting we've been having a series of technical difficulties, and this meeting may or may not be streaming at the time. But we're recording as far as we know, so we're going to go ahead with this meeting as planned. In attendance, we have Corey Shirtliff, Johanna Blanco, Kelsey Garcia, myself, Miles Lofton, Carolyn Conant. Jill Tatton is here via Zoom. And then in the audience, we also have Aaron, what's your last name? Aaron with it, Molly Gurney, and Rebecca McAllister, who are our applicants for our action item today. So we're going to move on to citizens to be heard. Did we have any?
There were no submitted citizen comments or testimony for any of the items on or off the agenda.
And nobody else is in the audience. So we'll move on to approval of minutes from our February 27th, 2025 meeting. Did you guys get a chance to? I look for Jill here and here.
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the draft minutes from the regular meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission from February 27th, 2025.
I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay. Corey, you ready for a vote?
We can just do
All in favor?
all in favor.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sounds like the meeting motion passed unanimously.
Yes.
Those are approved.
Jill was kind of a little cut off there, but for the record, she was.
Sorry, I raised my hand too, so a little
Audio
delayed.
comes through in spurts. Okay, so then we can move on to our action item for today. Consideration and possible approval of planning resolution number 05-2025, a planning resolution approving the parking special exemption request for 11 parking spaces for the press, eating, and retail establishment, change of use on property located at 35 East Center Street, Moab, Utah 84532. And we've got a briefing and possible action. Turn that over to you, Johanna.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. I have a discretionary action for you today, based on our applicant submitted their pre-application materials in October of 2024 for their new business venture, which I'll let them explain in greater detail when they speak. But it is a cafe / retail space / meeting space. And they will be moving into Burden. They will be moving into the old Times Independent building here. So that triggers a change of use, which brings on some new parking regulations. And here, we'll all go through how we got the parking calculations. So restaurants have one parking space per 200 square feet. We took the square feet they have allotted towards their restaurant portion of this building, and got 18 and some change spaces. The retail area of their store, we did similarly. and got 5 and some change spaces. Then in the code, it says for mixed uses, you add those up to get your total number of spaces, and that rounded up is 24. Also in the code, there's a section explaining that any existing uses, all the spaces that have already been accepted are granted to this new use. So they were allotted 13. So now they are left with 11 spaces that they are required to provide in order to get their business license and other things rolling. So the applicant is requesting all 11 of these spaces to be special exception. Now, I'll let them come up and chat with you about their plan for the space and their reasoning for the special exception.
I'll just come out.
Perfect.
We won't
Yeah.
do a group chat.
Do me a favor for Eve, our recorder, just
Yeah.
say your full name into the mic and then tell us about your project.
Rebecca McAllister. Just to maybe give you a little bit of history of myself and our group and the project. I am a local business owner in town already. I have Moab Made and Artesian, which is currently in hibernation. Erin also has Moss Cafe, which is a new business that you guys probably know about. So this project came about when Artesian lost its retail space on Main Street. And then the Times independent owners were really pretty gracious in offering this space and for this project to happen, primarily because they were hoping that this building that's been part of the community and the history for over 100 years and in their family for over 100 years would be taken on by somebody that wasn't interested in scraping the property and building up. They really were hoping it would be a project that would give justice to the history and be something positive for the community, which felt like really an honor to be brought into that. So fast forward to now, the plans for this building is to move retail back in or move Artesian into the space. Desert Thread, which is a company that a business we've had in Moab for 17 years, was really concerned about losing the opportunity to even run their business in Moab based on just rent and lack of retail. So they are staying in the building with us, which will bring in that mixed use. We created kind of a unique situation where we'll build out a smaller space so their rent doesn't need to increase. They'll just be in a slightly smaller space, but then also be open to this other retail environment and the mixed use. And then Moss Cafe, who's been wanting to offer seating, will also move into the building and have a second location. So neighborhood favorite spot stays where it is. And then Moss Cafe will open second location and be able to have seating. And then we'll be joining efforts to create like a kitchen foodie environment as well. So coffee plus cafe. Some of the big goals there are providing something that doesn't already exist in Moab. So we're not wanting to step on any toes. We're really wanting to bring like a middle ground to the food offerings. And so really focused on wholesome foods plus yummy baked goods, offering it in a way that small amounts can be purchased if wanted. So that just kind of gives you an idea of like what the plan is for this space. The primary reason, obviously, for asking for a parking exemption is just that upfront cost is pretty high for that many spaces. And with what we're trying to do to move into a building that has really zero infrastructure as is a pretty big tackle. So we're just trying to be very scrappy, very thrifty to get this done. And with really strong hope that this is something that feels really good for the community, that we're bringing something that like many people have asked for, wished for. Trying to think what else I can tell you about this project. There is also a pretty key factor that we have 5 spaces behind the building that are part of the property. We don't have legal access to them. They're owned, the property line from the, it's not called Wells Fargo, the property owners, it's another name, I forget the name, but Wells Fargo. They own right up to the building. So there's a tricky situation there. There is a city ordinance that allows it to be called to have city access all the way through that back alley, which we all use as a side street currently. We have been given written via email authorization from Wells Fargo that they would allow us to access those 5 spaces. There's a little legality there, but they're open to keeping it the way that it is right now, where people flow through the alley. So we would like to use those 5 spaces unofficially. I'm not sure if that's appropriate wording, but that's the scenario with the 5 spaces. So that would bring us to 6 being more needed. We did ask for a map from the engineer's office, and they gave us a before and after of the Center Street section here, from Main Street just to 100. So just that block that we would be on. And we tried to count it's like a above view. So we're just looking and trying to count spaces. And it looks like there have been at least 6 spaces added with the current parking update. We would love to be able to use what's already been done there. We also are very goal oriented in having a lot of biking, adding quite a few biking spots to the back of the property and potentially the front wherever we can. We are hoping to get like 28 bike spots with a variety of racks installed. We also are really hoping that this is something that adds to more of a walking opportunity just for locals and tourists as well. Center Street, there's been a lot of effort there to build Center Street up and become more of a walking path, pulling some of that walking traffic off of Main Street. And so we would love to also add to that, pull people that way. Yeah, I think those are the key points. Am I allowed to ask if there's questions?
No, excellent. Thank you. So I'm first, I'm curious if anyone else in the audience would like to come speak on the item for now. And if like questions come up, we may call you up and kind of ask you some questions. But I really appreciate everything that you're trying to do here. And I think several of the things close to my heart is Moss are something we've seen before, we've all dealt with. And so having this space would be cool. It would just be in regards to the parking, I wanted to ask staff a few questions and run through a couple things as well. So if you'd like to hang out in the audience, if we have other questions, we will ask.
Cool.
But we can move into the discussion portion of this item.
Yeah, I might to kind of put cap on the briefing. I know Johanna and I talked about this. This is, kind of Johanna's item, but in this one piece, given the precedent, I'll just kind of fill in the blanks. Maybe where we're going with this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
it's just more or less we'll tee up what I think is the discussion, and that we have a recommendation that is different than the motion here. So on behalf of the applicant team, this was a discussion that we've had about how to advance what is going to be their level 1 site plan. So they are getting a land use approval. It's not going to come before planning commission because the level of change of the building is not to a square footage degree that it's going to come back before you guys, but they are going to go through the changing uses that they have to go through. So within that, this is one of the key factors that we have to do. And we've been through a number of these recently and more historically after the last couple of years, specific to the Main Street and Center Street corridor, some parking exceptions. So with that, the staff's recommendation aligns with what we've historically done, utilizing what is the more broad variety of tools within the C3 to grant parking exceptions, which include a payment in lieu. That being said, the applicants in discussion with them wanted to advance this item is oh my gosh. So our meeting's going to end in 10 minutes, apparently, to our recording. So we're going to try to get this all in 10 minutes. Okay, so cutting this very short, staff supports the general vision of what is happening on the site and the use. However, to maintain precedent of the payment in lieu, we're making that recommendation. So that would require them to come back for a public hearing fee in lieu option for what is 30%, which is the maximum, which is what our precedent is, for the 6 units that are needed above and beyond what would be the 5 that are existing. So yes, there are 11 spaces that are technically legally needed, but clearly there are 5 that are there that will be used, but on paper, they don't really exist. So the 30%, the staff recommendation is rather than applying the 30% to the 11, we apply the 30% to the 6, but it is still 30% versus what the applicants are asking tonight is for an action for total exception given their scope and narrative. So I'll go ahead and cut that. We do have a 10-minute warning. If, worst case scenario, we will restart and we'll bundle the recordings. So let's not rush this too much.
Okay.
Jill, it just might be that we'll have to communicate with you to jump on another Zoom link if we don't get there. Okay.
So that was kind of where I was going with discussion. We still good?
I think we're good. I think we're good.
Okay, cool. So to go back 10 seconds on that. So we recently, Elsie's was looking for a few parking spaces. They covered some of theirs with fee in lieu and the remainder with a complete exemption. We offered a complete exemption to a very small business going in that was not going to have any kind of seating or otherwise, and it was over 1 parking space rather than several. So how do you guys feel about what's being proposed and the idea of exemption versus fee in lieu?
Yeah, I feel similarly. I think there's the examples that you just brought up of those pretty similar parking payment in lieu and exception request situations that we just had. And we certainly want to be treating the different businesses fairly instead of kind of cherry picking where we'll provide bigger swaths of exceptions or not. It did bring up some questions for me that are more for staff and possibly related to the code overhaul process, because I was so happy to see the intentionality put into providing additional non-vehicular parking, which I think is kind of lacking throughout downtown and in front of a lot of businesses. And I tried to do a quick scan of the code, but didn't see anything about bike parking requirements for changes of use or, when parking requirements calculations are kind of triggered. and was curious if that's something that's been explored in conversation with the consultants about the code overhaul process, or something that if we think might reasonably show up in the code could potentially come into our discussion today
Like
about,
parking in lieu.
right, exactly, bike parking in lieu as another option to kind of explore what's viable here.
And to just be brief because of our time clock, the short answer is no. We have discussed this, and we've actually been discussing this for a couple of years in a bundle with a parking revamp across what is our whole downtown core, but also just generally within Moab. Within this particular update, I think we've identified that as too complex of a problem to handle with what the update is supposed to be fixes. That's truly new policy that would be a different process. So it's kind of that element of would we want to bundle that as a part of this conversation? And you might have remembered when we had our hot topics or high priorities list, anything that was not an obvious, hey, this is clearly a fix. You know, if it took more than 2 minutes of conversation, we said that'll be the second update that we'll do after the fact. So that's something that I think that has been penciled for a later update. I think it would likely align with our complete streets policy, which we'll be moving forward with soon, to just generally support multimodal and mixed use transportation through all of Moab, but we're not there yet. So creating development standards and matrices based off of that would be a bigger bite. We want to get there, but it's a bigger bite that isn't not in the immediate future, probably near future, but not immediate.
Okay, and similarly, the calculations for parking requirements also aren't anticipated to change significantly in the code overhaul, because I'm thinking about the downtown dispersed parking improvements process and all of these, you know, exceptions that keep coming forward because of the very real space limitations that businesses are dealing with on Main Street and just off of Main Street, as well as kind of the you know, broader and additional parking opportunities that have been introduced to create a more walkable downtown. Like, do we really need to keep requiring X number of parking spaces be added per business when we feel like we have sort of a supportive ecosystem, more generally speaking, in the downtown area where people might have to walk a couple blocks? But
And I think to your point, like when we were talking about the Wabi Sabi's exception and LC's, we pointed out that there is a lot of parking along downtown that we have just created and we're very happy with. And at least in my mind, that allows these fee and lieu's and exceptions to be made, because if there was simply not enough parking, then we couldn't grant exceptions or fee and lieu's if there was just too much pressure on the area. But because we have this parking, we have them. I think my question tonight really is more about, like, do we think it's appropriate to allow them to have an exemption for all 11 spaces that they require? Or do we want to work something out? And my main question is, and as you pointed out, the way that those 5 spaces that are technically not there, but technically there, I like the idea of removing those and just having them pay for 30% of the sticks, because that's still kind of a gray area, but is at least us not forcing them to pay for 30% of the 11. And I'm curious if that eases the burden enough to make it more workable without us going completely against the precedent that we've brought against all the, or like brought forward to all these other businesses that, I mean, literally in just the last couple of months have come to us for very similar positions, like, you know, Wabi Sabi, LC's, all that. So that's kind of where I'm at. Jill?
I might just really quick before Jill get your comment. We have a minute and 30 seconds left.
Do you want to send
I
me
think
another
what we'll do
link?
is we're gonna have to likely restart an entirely different Zoom meeting, and then record from there. So Jill, I'll send you a new link shortly, and then we'll do that in house. But we can continue until we get kicked off.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, my internet at the hotel is a little sketch, so I've lost it a couple times, but I'm catching the most of the meeting. So yeah, I feel very similar to what Miles and Carolyn have talked about, we've made some exceptions but for a very small amount of spaces, not 11. So that does concern me a little bit. That's what's gone on in my mind as well. But yeah, this is a tricky one because I know the space. I know the building really well, been in it many a time, and do want to see a successful business be in that location. So I feel very similar, both sides. I want to see our local people succeed in town.